Hi, everyone, and thanks for being with me. It's glad that you could be with me on the Tony Tonkin Show. Just to have a conversation about things that matter to you and things that matter to me, hopefully, things that matter to all of you. So, today we're going to talk about specifically issues in relation to, I guess, division. Division within Australia, division in our community, and where has that come from and why is it here in the first place? How long has it been here and what is it that we can do about it? I've got a survey up which I'm asking people to look at, which is what is it that we can do about. I'm trying to find it now, I've lost it. Anyway, those of you that have seen the survey, please, please, yeah, are we more divided now than what we ever were before? That's the question we're asking in the survey. Oh, I just inadvertently deleted it, which I didn't mean to do, so I apologise for that. 7 people have responded. Okay, but the question we're really asking is, what are we more divided today since October the 7th, 2023, than we ever have been before? That is the question on everyone else's mind. It's on mine anyway. So I've made a couple of posts today already around this particular issue. I encourage all of you to look at. And I do need to say this session in particular is open to you. I'm interested in your comments, what you have to say, ideas that you've got. So I'll be focusing a great deal on the types of comments that you're making. I did get some criticism last live feed on Tuesday that perhaps I wasn't observing them as close as I should be, so I will do just that. Now, I also want to say, please subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. The other thing I guess I need to say is that someone did suggest that there were too many ads on a post I did a couple of weeks ago. The one I did earlier this week, I turned them off. I inadvertently turned the ads back on. I meant to turn it off. Again, punched the wrong button. But so I apologise for all of that. Future, yeah. The reason why YouTube asked us to agree to putting on the ads is that we're supposed to get 20% more for people that watch those ads. I have so few people online that it makes no difference to me whatsoever, so I don't need to have those ads on. So I do apologise if they come up on your screen. Just wait until they've gone, and then we'll continue the conversation. So I apologise for that. My bad. So one of the things I've been particularly concerned about has been the degree to which, since October the 7th, since the Bondi attack, is how divided we've come. Someone reminded me also on a comment to a post that I just read recently, that really the division in Australia has occurred since the Voice referendum. And I tend to agree. However, I will also say that I think the division in Australia around racism has always been there. Anti-Semitism is just an ugly face of racism, I guess. And then, we need to take a look at the way, not just around anti-Semitism, all hate speech and Islamophobia as well needs to be considered. And also, I think any comments that are made that are derogatory around LGBTQI plus people as well, or anybody that comes, Indigenous people also fall into that category. So we need to make sure that somehow we can govern the types of conversations that we can have. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to have conversations that are attacking, that are denigrating other people, but it does mean that we can have conversations that present a particular point of view. Now, I had an example of this where someone posted on a post I'd just made that in a comment section where they referred to me, they gave me the P word, and they did that a number of times. This is the second time I've actually ever had to delete someone from the comment section, so we won't be seeing them again. So my point is that we can have conversations. And look, there are plenty of people that have conversations in our comment section that I disagree with intensely. That there are people that attack me, but at least when they're attacking, they put up a comment, I guess, that has some intellectual depth to it. They're making a point, They don't necessarily attack me in a terribly derogatory way. There's one particular guy who does it all the time, and I have said to my wife times, I'd just like to delete him, but I'm not going to do that because the contribution that he makes sometimes is valuable, even though he's attacking me personally for most of the time. So make a comment, make a reasonable comment, present an argument, and I will respond. But on this terms, in terms of us dealing with this sense of division in this country, I think that we need to find ways to have reasonable debates. And certainly, maybe the legislation may or may not help. I do not know. But what I do know is that it's causing more and more division in our community. The coalition are confused about it. The Greens say they're not going to vote for it. One Nation are definitely not going to vote for it because it's an omnibus legislation and includes gun laws. And of course, as far as the Greens, the One Nation are concerned, everybody should have a gun. So they're so Trumpian and American in their attitudes. So there's a lot to be discussed today, and I'm going to start though with Peter Malinauskas, who's the Premier of South Australia. I'm going to start with Peter because Peter's got himself in a little bit of trouble. He was the one who did have conversations with the board of Adelaide Writers' Week in relation to Dr. Abdel Fattah. And for those of you who don't know, she's a Australian-Palestinian writer who was banned from presenting her work at the Adelaide Writers' Festival, which actually now is blowing up into a big deal, so much so that it's been broadcast on Al Jazeera, on BBC and on CNN and around the world, because this is a moment in time where politicians have become involved in choosing whether we should watch or listen to people that have differing views to their own. And one of the issues that pervades this whole thing really has been whether or not we could criticise Israel. And part of the legislation that is to be passed does not mention genocide. It does not mention whether we should or should not criticise another country. And we must remember, at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is driven by the extreme right-wing Jewish community. Not all of the Jewish community agree with that. In fact, there are some voices that have come out now who have declared their support for the Palestinian stand against the slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza. So a range of views, right? So to what extent does the government choose to differentiate between having a view and talking about it? It's a bit like me saying, well, you can have a view, but if you call me a name or disrespect me or insult me, I will delete you. That is my choice. And I think in a community, we have the same choice. Legally, we have the same choice. We can't slander people. We can't say things about people that we actually feel about them to some extent, or we can, but we can't use language that defames them. So I think there needs to be a conversation about how all of that should look. And whether or not it can be legislated for or against, I do not know. In fact, there's a part of me now that says that it is difficult and maybe even impossible to legislate against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. It may be impossible to do that. And maybe it's more about us as a community getting together and working out what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate, and making a stand against those people who do choose to use language that is damaging or harming of somebody else. It's like the people in my comment section. As I said, let's have a conversation. You can say whatever you like, providing it's not insulting. You can give a point of view that I might disagree with, but nevertheless, it's about having that conversation. And are we going to get to a point where we're going to prevent people from having conversations about the things that matter to them most? We may disagree with them, but at least they could have the conversation. And that's the great thing about the internet and some of the work that I'm doing, is to provide that opportunity for people to say what they need to say, but say it in a reasonable way, which is not about attacking a person or a race of people or a set of group of people that are marginalised in our community. We are a racist nation. There is no disputing that, and I've said that many, many times, and there will be people that may disagree or not. But the problem that we have is that degree of racism and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and whatever that stuff is, that shit that sits underneath that surface, it is bubbling to the top. And politicians are not suppressing it. In fact, if anything, they're encouraging those people to come out and say the terrible things that they say. And people will find other ways of saying it. You can't control the internet. You can't control what people from other countries are saying, and you can't control what they're saying on X and TikTok and YouTube to some extent. You just can't control it. It's going to happen. But the government is doing all that it can, I think, to try and control those sorts of conversations. Conversations that they don't like, that they feel contravenes their version of events in another country or affects, in fact, their relationship with that country, you know? And so I'm going to play this particular video from, which is a 7:30 report where Michael's interviewing Peter Malinauskas. Now, I do need to say that I have been a fan of Peter's because Peter has done for South Australia things that a lot of other premiers haven't done. But when I really think about it, Peter's very good at bringing sports to South Australia. He's got the Gather Round, which is a football round of Australian football here. He's got the motor car racing 500 here. He's done lots and lots in terms of sports in particular. But when it comes to having a political view and implementing and imposing his political view on a group lot such as the board of the Writers' Week, it raises some questions about his judgment. Now, Peter, I think, has shot himself in the foot, and at the moment Michael asked him about that, in fact. But I think the problem is that Peter saw an opportunity to make a stand against somebody whose views he disagreed with. As a result of that, Writers' Week, a very important week here in the cultural calendar of Adelaide, if you like, and Australia, because it's world-renowned, this event. Hundreds of people come to Adelaide for this event. It's worth about $60 million to the economy, and now it's been cancelled. And it is sad, I think, that Peter has got himself stuck in this quagmire of decision-making that has brought about the decline of such an event. And it's also impacted the Adelaide Festival generally, which is an arts festival. It's impacted that because people are also withdrawing. So I'll bring you to this particular video, and we'll talk about it throughout it.
The Premier, Peter Malinauskas, joins me now from Whyalla. Premier, welcome to 7:30.
Good evening, Michael.
You're one of the key voices calling for Randa Abdel Fattah to be disinvited from Adelaide Writers' Week. Now that literary festival, a jewel in Adelaide's cultural crown, has gone belly up, have you just kicked a big own political goal?
No, it's not about politics, Michael. It's about examining your conscience and doing what you think is right, consistent with a few basic principles. And few are more important to me than the idea of tolerance and inclusion, people to be able to express themselves of their opinions in a way that is safe and with mutual respect. And for mine, that's what the festival, and more specifically Adelaide Writers' Week, is all about, and something that I don't think Ms Abdel Fattah's positions accord with, and hence my view to back the board in their decision to remove her from the program.
When did you first tell the board, in your view, that this writer should be disinvited?
Well, the board's been struggling with this issue going right back to last year. In actual fact, in the middle of last year, a significant board member resigned from the board explicitly because of this issue, and a litany of others that occurred in the lead up to it. But in terms of my engagement, that particularly started to get involved.
Okay, so we know that he did get involved. He does go on to say that he just is one person, he has an opinion, but he is the premier. He is the man that makes a decision around all of this, and he is influential. There's no disputing all of that. And he's dug a hole for himself, poor old Peter has, and I don't think he knows exactly how to get out of that hole, because he has not only destroyed an incredible festival here in Adelaide, one in which my wife and I had in fact booked tickets for, and we decided that we're going to stay at a hotel in the city just to be close to the event. But we're also wondering about what other events we'll be able to go to, because so many people are now cancelling. So it affects not just people like me, but also people who are coming from overseas and interstate to be a party to this festival. And we've lost millions and millions of dollars as a result. It's a disaster. It's a disaster created by a man who believed that Dr. Abdul Fattah had a point of view that he disagreed with, and that he felt was not in context with the festival. And that's crap, because there are lots of people who come along with different ideas that most of us, or not most of us, that some of us may disagree with, but we go along and hear what they have to say anyway, because we have an opportunity to even ask them questions afterwards. It's a fabulous festival, and he's bastardised it. And I must confess, I'm a bit angry at that, because I also had an investment in this festival, and it's something we go to, my wife and I go to every year. So, but this is the problem. The problem is that politicians such as Peter Malinauskas insert themselves into decisions which are supposed to be independent. The board is supposed to be independent. Now, Peter hasn't talked about it here, but everybody on that board has since resigned. They've resigned because they realised that the quagmire created by Peter Malinauskas has been so deep and so entrenched that they will not be able to find their way out of it. And also, they needed to clear the board out simply because next year they need to be able to make sure that it's free of all this controversy. And I do need to add that Dr. Abdul Fattah has been recalled to appear at the festival next year. So they've all swallowed their pride, and they've all decided that this is the way it's going to go. So where does this lead us? And what does it tell us, I guess, about political interference in the discourse around what we should or should not be talking about? The reality is, it tells us that they need to blink and butt out. But they're not, because they're in political sense, they're now organising legislation that's going to be telling us what we should be thinking and what we should be saying and how we should be behaving as well. And I think to some extent, and I haven't read the legislation, even though I've downloaded it, it's 172 pages, a lot of it's in political speech that I don't understand, but nevertheless, it is there and we can all access it and read it. But according to many of the commentators at the moment, it will restrict our speech. Now, someone here, I think Danielle Cooper, one of my favourite people, mentioned, and I can't quite see it now, but Danielle, I think you mentioned that it doesn't prohibit or doesn't rule out Islam or I forget what you said. I don't know if you'll just put it back up. I can't quite find it here. I'm just having a look. So it's got a few posts here. I'm trying to find it. Sorry for the delay. The only group that the bill, so this is where Danielle put up something. The only group that the bill protects is the Islamic hate preachers. I cannot agree with that. I don't know what evidence you have, Danielle, that it does protect Islamic hate speeches, because I just believe that's a load of crap. You don't know what you're talking about, but you can challenge me over that if you wish. In what way do you think it only protects Islamic hate speeches? It doesn't. It actually, one of the issues around this legislation happens to be that any reference to text, whether it be the Bible, Quran, whatever, providing it's used for religious instruction, will be okay. I would posit that there are some versions of the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, which talks about the Jewish people, talk about the Jewish people slaughtering others, and vice versa. And I think that particular argument is just full of crap and full of stuff that we all need to be mindful of. And so I don't agree with you one bit. She said that the writers ruined Writers' Week. Well, I don't think they did. I think that was what the media did. So again, Danielle, I appreciate your opinion, but my version of your opinion is that you're wrong. So where does this lead us in terms of where the coalition sits about this? Now, I think the coalition are confused. Some of them agree with it, some of them don't. The coalition decided that they should, decided that Albanese was taking far too long in dealing with the issues in relation to the Bondi attack. They said that he didn't respond quickly enough, that and Susan Lee said that he should have recalled Parliament straight away. The reason for recalling Parliament, according to Susan Lee, was so that they could then have legislation placed before Parliament in relation to the Bondi attack, anti-Semitism and hate speech in general. That's what they wanted. Now, Susan Lee, for someone who's been in Parliament for as long as she has, I think should at least understand that the constructive legislation, to write legislation that is appropriate, to write legislation that isn't necessarily going to find its way to the High Court in the first instance, is really important. But Susan doesn't seem to understand that. So Susan initially believed so it was an opportunity to criticise Albanese for not doing enough around the Bondi attack. And we can have that debate. I don't necessarily think it was about him not doing enough. I think it was about Albo being a little bit more considered about people going through the grief process and then organising legislation that would deal with the issues, including gun laws and hate speech. But Susan Lee decided that whatever Albo did would not be good enough. So if Albo had come back to Parliament earlier, she would have criticised him for that because the legislation would not have been prepared. So a month later, Susan Lee's complaining that the legislation is too rushed, that now that they've had these 4 weeks to be able to organise appropriate legislation, it isn't good enough. It hasn't covered all the bases. It hasn't consulted with enough people. We don't know who they've consulted with. I'm pretty confident that both the Labour Party, the Liberal Party, and the Greens have consulted with as many people as they can. They have sought out stakeholders. They've had those discussions. They've decided what it is that they can and can't do. And as a result of that, they've all come with different views as to what needs to be done. But whatever Susan Lee has said has now divided the Liberal Party up. And I'll just bring us to this particular point, which I hope I can find here. Bear with. So this is it. Albanese hits back at... wrong one. Albanese hits back at Lee over rushed hate speech bill. Anthony Albanese slammed Susan Lee for saying that hate speech omnibus bill has been rushed after the opposition leader spent weeks demanding the Parliament to return, as I've been saying, and push through the new laws in response to the Bondi terror attack. Speaking at a press conference in flood-affected Queensland on Thursday, today, the Prime Minister accused the Coalition of not even reading the draft package, which is set to be debated next Tuesday during the emergency sitting week. Mr Albanese said he found Ms Lee's criticism and decisions to withhold support for the bill, which will deal with both hate speech laws and gun reforms, are quite extraordinary. The opposition leader said the Parliament should be brought back prior to Christmas, literally in the days after the anti-Semitic terrorist attack at Bondi Beach, immediately called for action, called for the Parliament. This is all stuff I've just been talking about before I even saw this stuff. because this came up on my feed just a minute ago. So that's why I had to sort of fiddle my way through it. Called for Parliament to be brought back and for there to be legislation, Mr Albanese said. Now, the Leader of the Opposition is saying that it is being done too quickly. And it goes on, it's not the one I wanted. There was another one here, which I hope I should have come out of this at the moment. So I'll see if I can find it. There was another one here, which is, so Coalition MP alarmed at Lee alternative to hate speech bill by, and I'll bring that up. Hate speech bill in jeopardy as Greens join coalition in rejecting legislation. This is their live coverage of this. Greens reject PM's hate speech bill, further endangering it. That's fine. Anthony Albanese's bill to combat anti-Semitism is in jeopardy after the Greens joined with the coalition blocking the legislation in its current form. The party deputy leader, Moran Faraki, confirmed the minor party would not be supporting the government's proposed hate speech bill, claimed it undermined political, civil and human rights. So, where is all of this going? Well, frankly, I've got no bloody idea. And I'd certainly be interested to know what most of you think about any bill that's going forward, whether or not you think that a bill around hate is going to produce anything that will have value to any of us. Will it just curtail speech? I'll just have a look through some of the thing about some of this that we really need to talk about, and which was one of these posts that I hope to be able to find, was that there's parts of the Jewish community themselves who are arguing that the bill either doesn't go far enough, or to suggest that whatever the bill is at this particular point in time, it should be implemented. Forget about the changes and so on. And so there's been some kickback from the particularly the right-wing Jewish groups, I think, where it says, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." This is a Jewish group urges Lee to back bill. The Executive Council of Australia jury has urged the coalition. These are incidentally, the Executive Council of Australian jury. These are the good guys in this area. And they're suggesting that urge the coalition to pass Labor's anti-Semitism reforms drafted after the Bondi attack, fearing the opposition leader Susan Lee objections could allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good. The call for unity from a prominent Jewish organisation echoes comments by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese this morning, who told ABC Radio he was stunned by the coalition's resistance to the proposal after almost a month of demands from the opposition that Parliament be recalled. Support for the bill from the coalition now seems doomed after Lee this morning said she had extremely serious concerns about the suite of hate speech measures. The Executive Council of Australian Jury on Thursday issued a statement urging the coalition to work to pass the bill, which Lee described as unsalvageable. By all means, seek to amend the bill to remove its shortcomings, but a wholesale rejection of the bill would not at all be warranted. In our view, the defeat of the bill would be a retrograde step, Co-Chair Executive Peter Welthorn said. The entire history of legislative reform concerning this issue has been one of incremental steps towards achieving the effective prescription of speech that deliberately promoted hatred of people based on their race, nationality, or ethnic origin. The current bill would represent a significant further step towards that destination, even if it does not completely get us there. And I guess one of the things that could be considered, and perhaps should be considered in relation to any bill, is that it can be amended, it can be changed. If it doesn't work, if it gets challenged in the High Court, then that bill or another bill can be written to supplement the one that's already passed. The point is, you need to start with something, that you should not decide for whatever reason that a bill should not go ahead simply because there are aspects of it that you may disagree with. It is better to put a bill forward that hasn't got a whole host of holes in it. Those holes will be determined by the High Court and others. So put the bill forward, see what happens, and then continue the debate. Doesn't mean the debate is over once a bill has been passed. If it does something towards addressing, in this case, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, then that's fine. But the problem that we have here also is that the bill tends to be focused primarily on the desires and the wishes of the right wing of the Jewish community. That it doesn't attack things such as Islamophobia as well. And there are a number of people who have come out against that in particular. I've already got that. That's fine. So where do we sit with regard to all of this? It's hard to say. Now, the other issue that's incorporated around this, of course, are gun laws. Now, if you're Barnaby Joyce and you're supporting a bunch of right-wing crazy people who simply all want to have guns, then that is obviously an issue for him. But as a city person, and I don't know whether most of you agree, what's the need for guns? We need to understand that since 1996 and the Port Arthur massacre, which is horrible in itself, wasn't politically motivated. It was just a crazy man. I mean, not to say that Bondi stuff wasn't about two crazy men either. It was, but it was about hate. But since 1996 and that terrible massacre, the guns in Australia have increased exponentially. So we don't have fewer guns, we have more guns. So how has that happened? It has happened because the gun policies have been watered down since, because the gun lobby, and this sounds very much like the United States, the gun lobby has been so powerful and so effective in this country that they've found ways to get through, and the manufacturers in particular have found ways to manufacture guns that don't fit under the restrictions. So as a result, there are more guns, more dangerous guns available in our community. Now, these are guns that are held by those people that are involved in organised crime. But nevertheless, there's a lot of guns out there. So the question is, Danielle's still carrying on, God. So I find that. So do you hope? What's that? So Danielle says, I will diverge because I did say that what I wanted to do was to focus on the things that people were saying. So by your logic, Multi, it means the Auckland shooting was justified as he had for Rotterdam written on an ammo case. You're an idiot. What can I say? It means the Auckland, which you can't spell incidentally, was justified. No, it wasn't. Of course it wasn't justified. Don't be stupid. That's just crazy. So we will just ignore her from this point on. So I guess my point is that there are two parts to this bill. It's an omnibus bill. They're bringing them all together. It's about guns and anti-Semitism. And as a result of that, the one side of politics is particular. Now, should these bills have been split? Maybe they should have. So there's a conversation about guns, which would have delighted One Nation and the right wing. And then there is this other conversation about anti-Semitism and so on. But the question too should be, is it about anti-Semitism specifically, or is it really about hate speech? And often I see this reference that is anti-Semitism laws. It should be about hate speech laws, not just anti-Semitism. And again, my concern is the reasons why that we must have anti-Semitism laws versus just hate speech, because somehow we want to separate between Jewish people and Muslim people. And we also must remember that here in Australia, the Jewish community is about 0.4%, whereas the Muslim community is 4%. It's greater. It's much, much greater. And then there's this argument, which I've heard many, many times, that the reasons why the Labor Party are supporting the Islams, Danielle will love this, is because they have they're a larger portion of the population, and they vote Labor. Who knows? There's a lot of Jewish people that vote Labor as well. But what this does mean is that for some reason, support for one group should be there over another because they vote. We've heard this argument in relation to Indian people coming to Australia because, we're going to support Indian people because blah, blah, blah. It's all crap. And it's all noise around all of this. And we must get through that noise so that we can actually see things for what they are, which are about hate speech being dealt with so that anybody who's vulnerable, who is being put upon by another group of people like Danielle, for example, can actually object to the way that they're being referred to and have the law that will say, well, okay, if you're going to behave this way, we're going to lock you up for 5 years. End of story. That's all there is to it. So let me know what you think about all that. So someone says, I don't ignore Danielle, don't feed drones. Fair enough. Does the Muslim Brotherhood play a huge... So that's an interesting question. I don't know. Get rid of that one. Don't want to see her again. Is the Muslim Brotherhood plays a huge role in this? Look into the role the Muslim Brotherhood played in World War II. I haven't heard, and I must confess, and thanks for that, because I haven't heard any reference to the Muslim Brotherhood at all. So perhaps you can explain where that comes from. I think it's a reasonable point. And I'm sure that there are, to what extent do they play, in what way are they playing, what's their activity, how are they involved, how are they influencing people, do they influence people? I don't know. So it's a good point though. And, to what extent are there Muslim activists who are working to influence the government as well? That's something I think that we ought to start to think about because we know what the Jewish content is around all that. And we know that given the Jewish community is such a small community, they have a disproportionate amount of influence over the government. And I think that needs to be considered as well. Right, so Smudgley says... I don't know why it keeps doing that. Newcomers, new courts should be monitored. They incite crazy. Yes, thank you for that, Smudgley, because, we've had a whole host of inquiries in this country over the years. And we've had inquiry into Indigenous deaths in custody, miserable failure because this last year there were more Indigenous people died in custody than any other year. And so the recommendations for that weren't fully they were considered, but they weren't implemented. We've had the inquiry into childhood sexual abuse, and that was a good inquiry, and that a lot of people had a chance to say what they needed to say, and that there was some retribution in relation to all of that, and people were offered some money. That was fine, but there again, not all those recommendations were implemented either. We had Robo-Debt, another Royal Commission into which there was it was a debacle, and there was a hidden agenda at the end of that. There was an appendage to that which recommended that certain people should have been not convicted, but they should have been tried for their involvement. That never happened. We didn't find out who they were. One of them possibly was Morrison himself. We've had lots of commissions in which they have failed, and yet we're going to have another one. And the other frustrating thing, I think, was that the Liberal Party wanted a Royal Commission, weren't happy with the Richardson inquiry because it wasn't a Royal Commission, and yet the Royal Commission is going to present its findings in December at the end of this year. And And the question is, and now they're saying this is bizarre, because now Susan Lee is saying, and others are saying, like Hastie is saying, well, we should consider legislation after the Royal Commission, so we know what the legislation needs to be about. So they were unhappy with what Albanese did in terms of calling the Parliament back after the Bondi attack. They're unhappy with the legislation that is being presented because now it's rushed. And some of them are saying now that they should wait until after Royal Commission, which is 12 months down the track. Now, when you think of inconsistencies, they're about as inconsistent as you come. They do not know specifically what they want, and then they wonder why they're losing popularity. At least, to be fair, at least one nation, if you vote for one nation, at least you know what you're voting for. You're voting as a racist. It's as simple as that. You're a racist, so let's vote one nation. It's quite simple. But if you're a moderate and a reasonable person, and you look at the Liberal Party, you're now thinking, why in the hell would I want to vote for them? They don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're going. They change their mind all the time. They can't make up their mind about anything. They can't help pass legislation. They're the no-alition. They're not going to vote for anything that the Labor Party presents. They are a waste of space. It's as simple as that. And I want to come to another point now, which really irritates me. So I've forgotten the date, but this month, is it the 20th or something? There's a day of mourning for Bondi. Now, I don't object to this day of mourning thing. Fine. Let's remember the atrocity that it was. 15 people died. In Australia, last year, 88 women died at the hands of the partner or somebody that they know. 88 women. 88 women. Now, why don't we have a day of remembrance for the women that died, for the children that are motherless and probably fatherless because the fathers have either killed themselves or they're locked up? Why don't we consider that? This isn't disparaging Jewish people. I love Jewish people. Jewish people are fabulous. Some of them have got the wrong end of the stick, in my opinion, but they're entitled to their opinion. The men who kill women for a whole host of reasons, usually jealousy, hate, fear, resentment, a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, are terrible human beings. They're, in a way, are they any different? And I'll put this to you. Are men who kill women any different from those two bastards who decided to kill Jews on December the 14th? Are they any different? So the men sit at home, and I know this because I worked with men for decades, dealing with violence, anger programs, whatever. I know that those men sit down there cooking up shit in their heads, at which they take out on their partners. So this isn't just about women who die either. This is about... So I'll try and bring this together. So this is about a group of people, in this case men, who decide individually to attack women and in some cases kill them or maim them or cause them to live in fear. That's a reality. That happens every single day, to the extent where last year 88 women died. And yet, we're having conversations now about an attack on a beach where 15 people died. Terrible it was. I'm not minimising it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minimising what happened. It was horrible. But should we also consider this other issue? The fact that men kill so many women, and we don't even report it anymore. We don't even report it. I think as a society, we're fucked. If we think that one event attacking the Jewish people, terrible, wrong, okay. But we don't think about the 88 people that have died. We don't have a memorial day for all the women that have been killed in the last decade, hundreds of them, at the hands of men. I'm just wondering whether you see the contradiction here. If you understand that a person's life is valuable, it doesn't matter who it is, Jewish, Muslim, women, children, it doesn't matter. Yet we are unable, we see death in Gaza every day, even today. We see children and women being killed by a government and by a force, the IDF, killing people at will because they don't like where they come from or who they are. We see men killing women because the women aren't compliant enough to their desires. What's the difference? Is the difference because they're not race, or is the difference because they have to be women, and because they're women we don't care? So I hope this makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. Because we need to, I think one of the problems that we've got in our community is we don't see things in perspective. We sit down and we watch our podcasts and watch the news that we want to watch, and we sit around in this little bubble of ours, hoping that it will protect us from whatever sits outside it, and that we shouldn't let the other side encroach upon our bubble. But there's a lot happening. We've been fighting and wrestling around Indigenous issues for 100 years now. We haven't ever resolved them. We haven't improved the plight for Indigenous people. Some have gained self-determination, but not everyone. Some still live in poverty, still have more children removed from them than any other group of people in Australia. More young people locked up as a result, more deaths in custody. So there are many things going on in our community apart from what happened on December the 14th. Many other things. So then do we become so encased in what happened in that one day that the other stuff which is happening around us every single day, we ignore? So we need to care for others. And it seems to be, it's not an unworthy distraction, but it is a distraction. It's a distraction from other things that matter. The woman who gets abused today, or who's being abused while I speak, there's not going to be a royal commission into what happened to her. There's probably not even going to be a court case. The The woman that gets raped today by a man, what rights does she have? Who's standing up for her? Do we get to a point where we just don't friggin' care anymore? That these people don't matter? No, we sit back and we debate what sort of hate speech we should have, or whether it's focused too much on anti-Semitism as opposed to Islamophobia. So we focus on, and I don't wish to minimise this stuff, so don't get me wrong, folks. So we focus on the 120,000 Jewish people, or the 400,000 Islamic people, whatever it might be. And we don't focus on the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of women who are being abused or being raped, or the children that are being sexually assaulted right at this moment, or the children that are being removed from their parents right now because we live in a shitty child protection system that doesn't work. These are all things I know about because I worked in these areas. So I'm not talking out of my ass about any of this. I'm not making this shit up. This is reality. Yet our focus and our gaze is on whether we should have guns or whether we should have hate speech. None of this shit is about protecting the most vulnerable people in our community. None of it. Okay, I guess we could say maybe the Jewish people are vulnerable people because they're a minority. I will accept that. Maybe we could say Islamic groups are a minority, so they should be protected as well. All groups should be protected. But there are a large swath of groups in this community who we don't give a shit about. Yet right at this moment, this is where our focus is. There's something wrong with that. Something wrong with it. I'm sorry I've been raving. This is a head topic of mine. I apologise to you all for that. Someone thanks me for saying thanks, Sandra, for putting it in perspective. Yeah, it's our kids that will suffer the most. So McBeach says, I feel like I've exhausted myself. Social workers and nurses know how the world is, Tony. We have seen people, and I think this must be a nurse, I'm assuming, or a social worker. We have seen people at their lowest worst. Most don't see the real world we know of, and that's fucking hell. It's so true. I really appreciate that post. I am starting to feel very emotional about all of this now that I've talked about it. It's like sometimes me doing this show is a bit like therapy. And I often say this to my wife afterwards, like I find myself saying things that have been permeated, been bubbling away in my mind. And then when it comes forward, I realise the significance of it all and the importance of it all, but I've never been able to articulate it. I've never been able to articulate it. This is a good post. I'm going to post this one up. Done that. I don't know why this doesn't work. Turn off the TV. Pay attention to family, friends, and the community. We have lost the richness that people used to get from these things. Our focus is on external things rather than love and kindness. Wow. So true. So true. I think sometimes I know that sometimes we're so engulfed in our own lives and what's happening to each of us that, and I understand this, I understand it, that we don't sometimes take time out to have a look at what's happening around us. That that there are times when, just the way, normal ways of living is enough to be strainful, and earning an income or looking after kids or thinking what you're going to do with your retirement. All those things can be consuming to the point whereby we are no longer observing what's happening around us. And when we talk, I talked a little bit earlier about that bubble that we have, that thing that surrounds us, that encases us in our own world without extending outside it. Reminds me that sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a look around what's happening around you. It's like, and I mentioned this in a post the other day, that my wife and I and my son and his partner were with my granddaughter down at the beach, and we just looked around, and there were people, and it's not hard, you just got to be tuned in, I think. And we looked around, and there were people who were mostly the people that were there were African, Pakistanis, Indian, Asian. And I looked around and I thought, this is who our society is. This is who we are. This is what makes us up. I didn't think there were no white people. There were some. I didn't think that. I thought this is a celebration of who we are. These are the people that make up this country, that have been making it up since the day that it was invaded by Captain Cook. These are the people, or Arthur, I should say, Prince, whatever. So sometimes looking outside the bubble and realizing that what we see outside the bubble is significant and relevant should be important to all of us, providing we take the time to look. There are some of us that are privileged to be able to look outside that bubble because of the work that we do, and it's not just social worker or a nurse or whatever. It's also police people that work in public service, people that work in hospitals, people that serve the community. They notice, but we all should be aware of what's outside the bubble, because it isn't always just about the hate speech and the gun laws, or just about the Jewish community or the Islamic community. It's about other people, and it saddens me to acknowledge that we don't recognise them enough. And that what happens to those people, the people we ignore and we don't notice, what happens to them is as significant as what happened on December the 14th. But we choose to celebrate because we're pressured into celebrating by certain influential groups in the media that one event. Whereas for every day, someone experiences the same sort of horror that those people experienced on December the 14th. So, I think I've probably said enough. I want to thank everybody for being involved today. I've had the highest number of views I've ever had. And I want to thank you all for being here. And I'm not going to apologise for making it emotional at the end, because that is the way I prefer my feeds to be. So thank you everybody for being here. And all I can say is, in closing, is look outside the bubble, see who else is there, because those people at least need to be acknowledged. Thanks, everybody. Take care.